Then in 1759, Edward Young published Conjectures on Original Composition, where he introduced the idea of organic as opposed to the mechanical nature of composition. Coleridge wrote, an original may be said to be of a vegetable nature. It rises spontaneously from the vital root of genius. It grows, it is not made. Imitations are often a sort of manufacture, wrought up by those mechanics, art and labor, out of pre-existence material, not their own. So Keats wrote, if poetry comes not as naturally as leaves to a tree, it had better not come at all. Again, so this is, you can say, their views. Coleridge's views about poetry, Keats' view about poetry. And what it is, Coleridge says that an original may be said to be a vegetable nature. And on the other side, he says that imitation are often a sort of manufacture, wrought up by those mechanics, art and labor, out of pre-existent materials, not their own. So this is also, you can say, the imitation is also from or out of the pre-existent material. It means they exist. That is the reason people talk about that. The poet talk about that. Then the second is of Keats. He says, poetry comes, if poetry comes not as naturally as leaves to a tree, it had better not come at all. It means that poetry related to or related with the spontaneity, spontaneity, and this is also the view of Coleridge. He says it rises spontaneously from the vital root of genius, from the from the intellectual mind of the poet. It rises from, it creates spontaneously, without any obstacle, without any, I would say, in the raw form, in the raw form. And you know that the raw form of anything is actually the pure form of it. So poetry comes spontaneously from the mind of. On the other side, you also know that William Wordsworth, he also has the same experience to talk about the poetry, and his definition of poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Okay, the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. It means that poetry does not talk about, or it does not come when you think about something and you are actually putting your efforts and labors onto it, and then you, poetry can come at any time, at any moment, because this is a spontaneous process, and it does not need any kind of, you can say, any kind of time, a proper time, or any kind of, it can come at any time. And that is the real poetry. And it looks like, as he John Keats talk about, naturally as leaves to a tree. So that is, you can say, the poetry all about. The idea of poetry as a series of strictly defined rules diminished the figure of a poet to a skilled craftsman. And in the beginning of the 19th century, it was rejected in the favor of the idea that creative process is regulated by the laws of its own nature. So you know that every age, when it comes, so that rejects the previous age. So in the 19th century, it was rejected in favor of the idea that creative process is regulated by the laws of its own nature. So in 1798, William Wordsworth and Samuel Coleridge published the Lyrical Ballads. The book became a landmark in English literature, indicating the beginning of a new era. The preface, written by Wordsworth for the second edition 1800, is often considered to be a manifesto for the Romantic movement. And in its, Wordsworth stated that the poet's imagination can reveal the inner truth of ordinary things, to which the mind is habitually blind. So the imagination can reveal the inner truths of ordinary things, in which the mind is habitually blind. Like mind is totally blind to those things. But when and how it comes to the surface with the imagination, with the creative imagination, the inner truths can be known. Then further he says, the poetry is not simply the unrestrained, spontaneous expressions of emotions. It takes its origin from emotion, recollected in tranquility. The initial emotion is recalled and reproduced in the poet's mind, and when it has been processed through thought, the creative act of composing begins. Now you see that he simply talks about the process of poetry, that how it is not merely a process of unrestrained ideas or spontaneous expression of emotion. He says that it is again a structured way of poetry, because according to him, according to Wordsworth, this is a structured way of poetry. How? He says that first of all, it is the emotion, that takes something or that perceives the knowledge of anything. Like if you are going somewhere, you look at some subject, some object of the nature, some components of nature, or anything that really appeals you, and that thing appeals based on your emotions, definitely. First of all, he says that it is the emotion that comes in your mind. First of all, the emotion. Like sometimes if you like something, that likeness is based on your emotion. So now there is an intake of that thing. Second is recollecting in tranquility. So now that thing remains in your mind for a while, you can say, for some time. The thing that you have collected from your emotion, it remains in your mind for some time. It remains over there. Why? He has beautifully talked about this thing that I'm going to share with you. That he said that whenever we are talking about our emotions directly, without any structure or without any organization or without any process, what happens, that thing definitely amuses to you, that thing appeals to you, that thing is admired by you, but not many. Why? Because when sudden feeling or emotion creates something that appeals to everyone. Let me give you an example of this, what he meant by this. Let me give you an updated or advanced example so you can understand in a better way. Whenever you go to a cinema with your friends or alone, and when you are watching a movie, so at that time you are watching that movie, and you are full of emotions, you like everything about the hero, about the actions, about the movie, the story, the plot, everything at all. And at that time you are out of your emotion. First of all, you are full of emotions, and then you are out of control actually. And at that time you are saying, oh yeah, this is the best movie that I ever watched, fabulous, remarkable. That was the thing that you have just imagined based on your emotion, and that thing really appealed to you. But when you are out of the cinema and time passes, for example, if 1 hour is gone, 2 hours is gone, what happens? Then there is some decline in that emotion. If someone asks you about the movie after 2 hours, you will not share the same response as you have been doing when you were watching the movie. And this is it, because at that time you were full of emotion. And sometimes when you are full of emotions, you can say many things improper, indecent, immodest. that are not likely to be the subject of poetry. Excellent. This is the approach of those writers. So, what they need to do, they need to settle down their emotions for a time, for a while. And when those emotions are actually settled down, then what is the next process? The initial emotion is recalled. So then, when the emotions are settled down, then those things that you have experienced, then you have to recall them. You have to recall them. You just need to remember them. Okay, what I've experienced at my first sight. The third process. The first is motion. The second is your you can say the recalling of that emotion, and the third is actually reproduction. Reproduction of that thing, of that emotion that you have experienced, so you have to reproduce it in the poet's mind. And when it has been processed through thought, then the fourth act is actually the creative act of composing begins. Excellent, you can say, composition of a mind. That how it starts with emotion. Sometimes it is associated with your feelings, with your love feelings. Like you can call it as love at first sight. Sometimes you fall in love with something, with any object, with a flower, with a scene, with a scenery, and that is you are full of emotion. At that time, when someone asks you about that thing, you will be out of control, and you know that there is no limit in that thing. So that will not be the part of the poetry, because you just need to wait for some time to settle down your emotions. And when your emotions are settled down, then you can recall them. And you have to see whether those emotions, after some times, whether those emotions give the same pleasure, give the same value, give the same validity and authenticity, even though after some times or not. And if you feel so that, yeah, it gives the same validity now, it gives the same charm and delight now, then you can recall it, reproduce it, and then that becomes the creative act of composing, or that becomes your, you can say, your piece of writing. Is it understandable?
Yes, sir.
So the poet, yeah. So the poet is a man speaking to man. He is not a god. He is not the one who does not have any, I would say, any interactions with the people. He is simply a man. And in the same term, when I've given you an example of Sherman Alexie, and this is the same that they have talked about. The publisher has talked about. And what was that? Shaman Alexi said that whenever I start writing about my people, it seems that all the people, they are with me and they are writing about. And they are saying, Shaman, last time you have written a poem that was about me. So every individual of the society is saying the same. I'm symbolically talking about this thing. It means poet is a man speaking to man, speaking to man. And he uses a special gift. And what is that special gift? Literary competency. The literary competency. You know that every writer's literary competency is different from another. So that is his special gift. A call of principle. Just wait.